I was just listening to a podcast with Mark over at The Financial Firefighter and Michael from One Rental at a Time. And they were talking about how this is the first true buyer's market we have really seen in a long time. And as a real estate investor, as a real estate broker who represents a lot of buyers and sellers and transactions and has been for the last several years, I truly believe that. I think this is the first buyer's market we've seen since 2019, and not even to say that 2019 was necessarily a true buyer's market, but in my perspective, it was the last time the buyers really had a chance, that it was not just in the seller's realm and they were the deciding factor. Now, one thing that, and I took some notes so I can stay on track here because I didn't want to get all over the place. One thing that Michael said is, if right now in this buyer's market, buyers are willing to make disrespectful offers, that is where they're going to have opportunities to find deals and succeed. And I really kind of thought about that for a second. And for somebody who is maybe a new investor or not an experienced investor, I wanted to break this down a little bit. So first, I wanted to start by defining to me what a disrespectful offer is not, what it may be, and what I think that he meant. And I wasn't part of the conversation, so I'm not 100% sure. There are some disrespectful offers that are just ignorant. I have worked with people over many, many years where people put an offer in that it is just so stupid that it's not going to get accepted. What it does is it just pisses off the seller and it makes them unwilling to negotiate and work with you in any way. So there is a way to do it. I want to talk about if you're going to put in what a seller would consider a lowball or a disrespectful offer. I want to talk about how we strategically do those offers and have more of a likelihood of success, and what I think is a responsible, disrespectful offer. And so I once had somebody come to me, and in this case, it was a foreclosure, and so it wasn't an individual we were submitting offers to, but I had somebody come to me and they submitted a $5,000 offer on a house, which is sometimes appropriate. I know people get houses for $1 in some places, but in this case, it was not. And they just said, well, I'm just going to keep coming up $1,000 more until they accept my offer. And because it was a WCDA foreclosure, which I was the listing agent on, which is Wyoming Community Development Authority, I am not allowed to submit offers verbally. And so they kept saying, well, we are going to reject it, but you have to submit it because those are the rules and the laws around this. And so I submitted $5,000. I can't remember if she's going up 1,000 every time or 100 every time, as 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. And I kept having to put these in writing every time and have them reject it. I think we got to 9 or 10 and the lady gave up. It wasn't going to happen. So you have to know your market and know your numbers, or have a trusted agent that can help you with those numbers. But sometimes you're just stupid. So I do want to start with that. Then there's disrespectful offers that sometimes a seller feels like an offer is disrespectful because the seller's listing price is not based in reality. So there are a lot of times that I will have a client look at a house, or I will look at a house and we'll go, we can submit something and try, but that seller is so far based out of reality and what they price that house at, they're going to think your offer is disrespectful. However, it's appropriate for the market. And so they're going to take it as disrespectful. And so I wanted to define disrespectful offers as something that makes your numbers work that may not be something that the sellers like. And so we are starting to see houses sit for longer days on the market than we've ever seen before. And we're seeing a $10,000 price reduction, a $10,000 price reduction, a $10,000 price reduction. And eventually these houses are selling for significantly less than they listed them at. But originally the seller wants a higher price. So if you were to offer $40,000 lower on day one, they're probably going to tell you no. But when it's been sitting on the market for a few months, you may be $40,000 to $50,000 lower than what they listed with. So I just wanted to start by defining in my mind and the way I'm addressing this what a disrespectful offer is. All right. So if you want to submit a disrespectful offer and actually have a chance in heck, then these are the steps that I would recommend you take. The first thing is you need to pick the right real estate agent. If you are submitting your offers yourself and you are dealing directly with a seller like an off-market property, or if you are an agent, a lot of investors are agents, then you can just throw this piece out the window. But think about how I'm talking about interacting with them. In real estate, agents get reputations. And so there are agents that I get an offer from and I automatically go, I know they don't do their job. I know they don't fill in their contracts. I know that they're hard to work with. And so there's people that you just dread getting offers from. There's also agents that have reputations for being very difficult to work with and very disrespectful. And so if you're trying to do something very difficult, you want somebody who is a tact expert. And if you're doing this yourself, then you need to be the tact expert. And there are times that you have an agent who, I see it where I think what the agent's trying to do is act like they're really fighting for you. But every transaction, they're making adversarial. They're making it like you're adversaries. I don't know the actual way to conjugate that. And so I think they think it makes it look to their client like they're fighting harder for them. But ultimately, the seller wants to sell, the buyer wants to buy, and if we can work with each other better, we have a better likelihood of success. There are statistics for big companies and really high up positions that people do not hire the person that is always the most qualified person. People qualify the person or hire the person that they actually want to work with, that they want to be around on a daily basis. And so if you have an agent that's going to go in and present this in the wrong way, it could kill the negotiation from the beginning. So you really want to make sure that you have somebody, or if you're doing it yourself, that you are on top of how you're presenting this. I want to go into, we're talking about disrespectful offers, but respect. I want to present this offer in a way where I am not going in and trashing their home. You don't understand why they're selling. You probably do not know. You don't know the background. And although in business, we have to make this a business decision and a number decision, it might not be a business decision and a number decision for the seller. And so maybe there is a family there. Maybe something really traumatic happened and that's why they're selling the home. Or maybe they're just really emotional, driven people. And so you have to think about when you present this offer, even though it's going to be what we consider a disrespectful offer, doing it in the most respectful way possible. I want to give you an example. I had a listing that was sitting on the market. It had been appraised. It was a motivated seller, but they had just had some bad luck, and we got a lowball offer. And the person came in and they didn't even give us an offer. So they didn't give us a written offer. They didn't give us a pre-qualification or verification of funds. Basically, they had their realtor send an email saying all the stuff they thought was wrong with the house and why they were offering so low. And this was a really, really low offer. So that was part of why the sellers rejected it too. But basically, they just really insulted the house and they really insulted the seller. And the seller was like, yeah, no, kick rocks. That is not the way to do it. I get what they thought they were doing. They thought that what they were doing is saying, these are all the financial things that we're going to have to deal with, and for those reasons, we want to be lower. However, we had an appraisal done before they listed that factored all those things in. And so they were doing this really low offer, but the point I'm making is they really insulted the sellers. There's a way to come in and say, these are how my numbers work for me. I understand that you guys have the house priced higher. This is where we're submitting our offer. And this is where if you are presenting it or if your agent is presenting it, it's important to ask them to communicate to the seller. We are not trying to offend you or disrespect you in any way. This is just the numbers that work for us. So we totally understand if this is a no for you guys, but we at least wanted to try and throw it at the wall and see if there was even a chance. Then you're coming in a manner that you're not saying your house sucks, your price sucks, your whatever, even if it does, right? And you're also approaching them in a friendly manner, so no pressure, right? You can submit 100 offers and maybe one of them's gonna stick. If you come in and you hurt their feelings and you're rude and you're disrespectful, they are way less likely to work with you. Now, this is where I wanna get to your strategy on selecting what your disrespectful number is. Sometimes people just want to get the best deal possible and they just do these crazy low offers. And if you're submitting and maybe you're really actionable and you're working in a lot of markets and you're submitting hundreds and hundreds of offers a month and you're really on top of it, then you're just spitting out volume trying to get the best deal. But what I suggest is calculating the numbers and submitting an offer the way the numbers work for you. So not trying to say, how low can I get them? How much can we drive this down? But really just figuring out, these are the numbers I need to be at. These are my targets and this works. Because then you can tell them that, listen, I am just submitting what works for me number-wise. And if we can't come to terms, I totally understand and we just wish you guys the best. I have submitted offers before where I told somebody, I think if you wait longer or you wait for somebody else who's not an investor, you may be able to get more. The only thing with me is I'm quick in cash, or I'm quick in as is, or I'm quick and I'm not going to ask you for any repairs, you know? And so I am really honest and open that this might not be the best deal that you're going to get, but you're going to get the deal. And so just respectfully approaching the way you present your disrespectful offer. So you're not trashing the house. You're not making it personal. You're just saying, these are my numbers. Make it about you. Don't make it about them. All right. So now I want to go on to make it official. Make it in writing. So in real estate, if you give a verbal offer, and if you're an agent, you're going to be familiar with this. If you're not, you might not. An offer is not binding until it's in writing. And so a lot of times when people do lowball offers or really bad offers, you'll get them verbally. And that's because their buyer's agent knew their offer was so bad and so low that they didn't want to take the time to put the offer in writing until they knew it was going to get accepted. So that's an indication to the seller, and that's an indication to the seller's agent that the buyer's agent knows the offer is bad. The other thing is even if you get a seller that is willing to, or maybe even sort of consider it, it doesn't matter, because if they don't sign it and you don't have it in writing, you could submit this offer and disappear. Putting an offer in writing and attaching either a pre-qualification, pre-approval letter, or if you're cash, a verification of funds, it shows you're serious. I have had really motivated sellers. Maybe they're not dropping their price a lot, but from conversations on the back end, we know that they're willing to take less. Maybe it's a divorce, maybe it's a relocation. Maybe I've had people who just have had a house a long time and they're these unicorns and you don't know until you try. But I've had people get offers that are low, and I think if they waited a little bit could get something higher, but they'll say, this is the number I wanted to be at. This hits it. I'm okay with that, because maybe they've had the house for 40 years or something like that. But they go, I don't want to mess with this verbal offer. That makes me think they're not serious, or that makes me think their agent isn't serious, or that makes me think, why am I even going to play this game and they're going to disappear? Do we know if they're pre-qualified? Do we know if they have the money? And so if there's even a chance they're going to consider it, you don't want to give them the time to think about it and go, yeah, no, never mind, I changed my mind. If you give them that offer in writing, it shows you're serious and it shows you're qualified if you show the financial support. Here is the other piece of it. If it's not in writing, even if you all verbally agree, I've seen this a million times, agents are lazy, they submit verbal offers. In the meantime, they get a written offer that is better and they lock it in. And so this is why we do offers in writing, and we do offers in writing in a timely manner. It's just the way it needs to be done. Okay, I want to move on to convenience. The biggest factor, to me, this is the most important piece. If the price, to me, when you sell a house, the most important piece is price, right? So if we know we're not giving them what they want price-wise, the second most important factor for people is convenience. And for some sellers, convenience is the first most important factor. And so if you are going to submit an offer that doesn't meet their desires for price, you need to meet their desires for convenience. So are there pain points for this seller that you can alleviate or relieve? Then do it. Sometimes this means asking upfront, having your agent ask upfront if you're not communicating for yourself, do they have a preferred timeline? Do they want to live here a little bit longer? Are there things they don't want to deal with? Like, I once had a client buy a house that was full of furniture they didn't want because the other people had a second home. They were moving to the second home, and the buyer did not want this furniture. It was not their style. It was packed full of stuff, but they were getting a good deal in a tough market, and they said, take whatever you want, leave whatever you want, we will deal with the rest. That person was able to pack their suitcases and go. There were literally sheets on the bed. There were beds, there were sheets on the bed, there were furniture, there was wall hangings, there were linens in the closet. And that buyer dealt with it all on their own because they were trying to make it convenient for the seller. Now, if this is a really rough property, so some of you are buying properties that are in pretty decent condition, and some of you are buying properties that are in horrible condition, and the strategy is going to have to be modified depending on what your buy box is and what kind of seller you're working with. If you have cash, you can be a little bit more strategic about this than if you have a loan. So one thing a lot of people don't know when they first get into real estate is you see those really cheap houses on the market that are in really bad condition. They get a lot of phone calls. As an agent, as a listing agent of a property like that, Houses priced under $100,000 or whatever a cheap house is in your area. In my area, anything under 100, we're going to get a ton of phone calls on it. Most of the time, if a house is priced under $100,000 where I work, it's not loanable. It's a property, so banks are going to have minimum condition standards, just like they qualify the buyer, they qualify the house, because the bank is always worried about protecting their interest. They want to make sure that if you default on that loan as a buyer, you never make the first mortgage payment, and they got to turn around and foreclose and go through that process. They want to redeem as much of that loss as possible. So they have minimum condition standards of properties. This could be things like you can't, safety things, right? Can't have knob and tube wiring. In my area, if you're familiar with shingles, can't have T-lock shingles, or you can if they're in great shape. It's getting harder because they're hard to insure. So anything that makes your property not insurable makes it hard to finance because they want that guarantee. Can't have knob and tube wiring because you can't get insurance on a new policy for that. Have to have handrails on steps over what's the 30 something inches, or I can't remember. I'd have to look up the code. You have to, if the house was built before 1978, you can't have peeling paint. If you do, you got to scrape it and repaint it. Can't have more than one layer of shingles. If you have a property that's built 1978 after, but it has peeling paint, you still might not be able to leave that because it's exposed wood or building materials. They still might make you paint it for the integrity of the property. There are certain things that always come up every time. So sometimes a property is in such bad shape, somebody says, I'm just selling this as is. I'm not doing any repairs because I know no bank's going to loan on it unless you do a rehab loan, which is a whole different conversation. Traditional conforming loan is not going to loan on it. And so I'm selling to investors or cash buyers or people working with rehab loans or in-house bank loans, and they price lower because they know that's a risk and there's a smaller buyer pool and someone's going to have to put money into it, and there's a whole strategy to that. So if you're buying a property that's under, a financeable threshold, then you're probably buying it as is for the most part anyway. It's hard to negotiate repairs on something like that. You usually just negotiate it into the price. But if this is a property that is financeable or mostly financeable, sometimes there's properties that are probably financeable, but we're not quite sure. We don't know if the appraiser's quite going to catch that little thing over there or call it out. Or maybe one appraiser would call it out and one wouldn't. Depends who we're getting, right? And so I actually have purchased properties that at the time, we bought a triplex several years ago. There at that time was no way we could have bought a house in cash. We had to be able to get a loan. We were doing an FHA loan. We were putting 10% down. So there was a chance that lender required repairs were going to come up. I did the lender required repairs myself, so it was convenient for the seller. Generally, a seller is responsible for making the home financeable, but in that case, we were getting a deal that made sense for us, and I really wanted to be able to get the loan, so I personally went and did the lender required repairs to make the home financeable and made it convenient for that seller. Now, there's some strategy to this. In that case, it was labor. It wasn't a lot of money. The risk is you do the lender required repairs, say it's a roof or something expensive, the deal falls apart. Do you have something in writing that says you're getting made whole somehow if that deal doesn't close because you're putting money into someone's property? For me, I was just mostly putting labor in a few $100, so it was worth that risk. But I was making it convenient for that seller. I wasn't giving him what he wanted in price, but I was making it convenient labor-wise, and no other buyer is probably going to be willing to do that. Maybe there's a timeline that matters to them. Maybe they want a really quick closing. Maybe they want a longer closing. Maybe they want to occupy a little bit after closing and rent back. There's risk to all these things to you as a buyer, but if you're trying to just get it at a certain price point, then maybe these are things that you can work with on them or work with them on. Leave it open. This is, I think, a really important one. A lot of times when somebody first lists their home, they are unrealistic about the reality of what they're going to get for that house. I cannot tell you how many times when I list a property as an agent and I give all the comps to that seller and I say, here is all the data. We have so much data. I'm not making this up. I'm not pulling it out of my back pocket. I am literally giving you market data. I have had clients get appraisals and just disregard them. Nope, we don't agree with the appraiser. We think he's wrong, which sometimes appraisers differ in opinion. So that's a whole nother conversation too. But I can't tell you how many times I give sellers data, they completely disregard it, they pick their price, they tell me I won't take anything less than this, and I say, okay, and I update them as we go. Here's the market data, here's what the market's doing, here's the current market conditions. I never try to convince somebody on day one. I just give them the data and give them my recommendation, and it's their decision, it's their home, it's their money. Something that a seller is not willing to do on day one, when their house has been sitting on the market for 190 days, they may be willing to do. And sometimes people have to learn for themselves because they always think their house will be the unicorn. Yeah, I understand that house sat on the market or didn't sell for as much, but they think their house is special, or they're not really ready to accept the reality. But as time goes on and they don't get offers, or they don't get showings, or they get negative feedback on their property, they may be willing to accept something as time goes on that they're not willing to accept on day one. So what I like to do is talk a couple things. You can either do the offer and say, okay, we understand. And if they say no, especially if you've done this respectfully, you can stay on good terms with them. I understand you're not willing to do this now. If your house doesn't sell and down the road you're open to a conversation, please feel free to come back to me. If my money is still available, because I'm still looking, I may buy something else. The numbers may change because the market may get worse. But if you guys get 6 months in, 3 months in, 30 days in, and you decide, oh shoot, our house isn't selling, maybe we should go back and talk to them, let them know to send their agent back to you. Or if you're dealing with them directly, is it okay if I reach back out to you in 30 days if the house hasn't sold? One thing I love, when you put an offer on HUD Homes, FHA foreclosures, sometimes you submit an offer and they reject it, and you'll get an email back from them. So as an agent portal, I'll put in offers. And sometimes HUD will send you an email like 3 months later or 30 days later and say, we're willing to accept XYZ now. If you're interested, resubmit an offer. And that's, I think, why a lot of people like submitting offers on foreclosures, because the emotional piece isn't there. It's literally, these are the numbers they'll take, these are the numbers they won't, and we can come back again. With a human being and somebody that owns and loves a home, it's a different animal, because they're not thinking rationally probably, and they're not thinking 100% with a business mind. It's literally a different game, and you have to approach it differently if you're doing an auction website or if you're dealing with a human being. I'm talking about here if you're dealing with a human being. So still with a human being, if you can leave it open. I have had times where I have been a seller's agent. I thought it was a good offer for the market. They didn't want to take it. And then we've gone back. I said, do I have your permission to reach back out to these people and see if they found a home? Because they may have bought a home by now. Or if they're still open to that number, are you open to it now? And sometimes we can find them and make it work. Sometimes sellers really regret having not taken it, and that buyer's already bought another home. So leaving it open is a fantastic strategy, because they might be able to accept something later that they're not willing to accept today. Now, the only other thing I will say, and this goes back to either being skillful at discussing and having a good personality yourself and being respectful, or your agent doing it. Before you even start all of this, sometimes it's worth going to the agent and getting a feel of the situation from them about their seller client. Your agent is willing to disclose, discuss, talk about anything you give them permission to. So there are certain things that agents can't share and say unless you give them permission to. So I have had as a buyer's agent, I have had buyer clients tell me, I am only willing to pay this much for this house. It's priced here. I'm willing to pay this. I'm not going to negotiate. This is where my numbers make sense. This is where I'm willing to pay. But it's such a gap. I don't want to upset the seller. And so, for instance, right now in this moment, I have a buyer client that is looking at a property that is super overpriced. It's not overpriced for appraisal. We actually know this house has appraised, but for our market and the repairs that it needs, because it's not financeable, there's just no way that price makes sense for anybody but for this investor. And so I called the agent and I said, this is what my buyer asked me to do. My buyer is willing to pay this much. I know this is a big gap. And I also know this is someone selling a family member's house that has passed. Are they willing? Are they very emotional? Would it be better for us to submit this offer now? Like, do you think, and I understand that agent can't share a lot. So we're asking them to share what they're comfortable to share, what they're willing to share, or what they think. And sometimes they'll say, sorry, I can't discuss this with you without talking to my client. Sometimes they have a little bit more leeway and permission. So we asked, is it better for us to submit this offer now? Or is this going to offend them so much that it sours the waters? Because maybe they've gotten other offers higher and said, no, we're not even. And she knows how they've reacted. Is this going to upset them so much that if in 6 months this house is still on the market and we come back and submit this number that works for us, Are they going to remember those bitterness feelings, even though the market has changed, even though they realize, oh, wait, I should have taken that offer, but they have a feeling about this buyer because of how it made them feel when we offered it? Is it better for us to do this offer now, or should we wait? And if in a couple months the house is sat on the market, maybe they've dropped it a little bit lower, should we come back and submit it then? Because we're not going any higher. It's not like if we offer this and they counter offer, that's not it. This is where they're at. And in this case, the agent said, I think you should wait. I don't think there's any way that they would even consider that offer. Then you have to decide if you want to submit it or not. I take that information back to my buyer. They let me know what they want to do. But some house, like I have a house I'm watching right now, same thing. It's not financeable. It's going to have to be a cash buyer. It's a family house. Somebody passed away, so I know there's a lot of feelings and emotions attached to it. The house is priced too high. I literally bought a house of the exact same floor plan, and I'd say an inferior neighborhood, but in better condition, exact same floor plan for $50,000 less. And so I'm watching this property, and I'm potentially interested in this property, but not at that price. And so I'm going to wait because I feel like day one, first week on the market, their feelings may be hurt if I submit this offer now. But if we get into winter, people don't like to take care of houses that are vacant in winter. It makes them nervous, especially here because we get so cold. And the house is sat and they're not getting offers. Maybe they do a couple price reductions. Then I will come in and make an offer because I'm not trying to negotiate. There is a number that makes sense for me and there is a number that doesn't make sense for me. So I'm going to wait until they adjust a little bit to the reality of the market. And then I'm going to go in and make my offer. Right now, it's too far of a gap that it's going to hurt their feelings. But later, once they realize and it sells, I hope for them it sells and they get what they want. But if it doesn't, and they've kind of realized as time passes, then they're going to be more open to having a conversation and seeing that this house is sat and people are not interested. Buyers are not jumping in this market. So that's my whole thing. Disrespectful offers, there's a way to do it that is going to work better in your favor and be more tactful. So go about it in the right way. And you may have a much better chance of success. And I hope that you do. See you guys on the next one.